Marga Hoek,
Hi.
good morning
Thank you.
and welcome.
Thank you very much.
Marga, you've had a career in business and entrepreneurship around building businesses, but latterly around mobilising and facilitating business networks. You've got a very strong passion about connecting business to science and business to education. And very, very specially, you've become an author of a new book on the new economy, which we're delighted to see won the Management of the Year book in 2014. And I'm sure we'll be discussing in some detail during our time together.
Right.
So, first question from me. Your assertion is that we are, or that we should be living in a new economy.
Yeah. Well, I call it new economy on purpose because we shouldn't underestimate the change we have to go through. In fact, currently we have a system and an economy where the world serves the economy, you could say. We measure what we produce, we measure our output, we don't measure the value creation and destruction on the assets of the economy. So my thing is that we should look to the economy from a broader perspective and take into account all the assets that we have. So our social assets, the people, the knowledge, the community, everything we have in that perspective. Ecologically, our resources, but also the climate, the output of the ecology. And financial, so in fact, the way we connect value to money and capital.
You referred to Paul Polman from Unilever, saying this during and after the climate deal in Paris at the end of last year. One of the things that struck me about the agreement from the Paris Agreement is that the big absence there is business. So one looks at the agreement, when it seems to me that the motor, what's going to move us forward in this new economy, are businesses.
Well, I'm happy you said that.
The agreement.
Yeah. Well, they're absent in the agreement,
Yeah.
but business was actually more than there, with much more impact maybe than politicians would have ever been able to expect. If you look at all the pledges, and I was really engaged in the Paris deal, of course, if you look at all the pledges from business and you add it up in terms of economic effect, then all those pledges were worth like trillions of dollars.
Yes.
So trillions of dollars of investment potential to change the way around and to change our economy into a low carbon one. If you estimate the low carbon market at this time, it's worth already in 2012 like $5.5 trillion.
Yes.
And growing each year with large growth percentage.
Yes. And of course there we see the role for entrepreneurship as well, that
Exactly.
entrepreneurs can see where the innovation is and don't see the constraint, but rather see the opportunity.
Well, sometimes I say entrepreneurs, they realize ideals. They don't just talk about it, they do it.
Yeah.
And they have the persistence to go on and to go on. I mean, research indicated that it takes more or less 7 years from an idea to really an impactful implementation.
I guess to some people, an entrepreneur writing a book, which is an act of reflection that takes considerable time and investment, is perhaps slightly a strange thing for an entrepreneur to do, or a person with an entrepreneurial mindset.
It's definitely.
Tell us about why you did it.
Well, I've had a career, like I was CEO and a member of the board of directors of several companies. And I always had to navigate my way to see where the future would head if you want to really take upon yourself to do big innovations. And since I've been leading those networks, I noticed that I have an overview, of course, because of my roles, of a lot of examples throughout the world, a lot of new dimensions in the way you can do business. But people who are working in just one company, they have always one part of the puzzle, or they see all kinds of elements, but it's like a shattered image. Yeah. It's not a clear reference frame.
Yeah.
I wanted to make use of the fact that I have the privilege to see so many things, build them together and build a new reference frame from it in a clear way, so it would help other entrepreneurs who want to innovate their way of doing business into a sustainable one, to have like a bit of a compass how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it has some management theory, because we need to think and reflect and build new models how we do business.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
important.
Yes.
And also put in like 50 or so inspiring cases throughout the world to show people it can be done. So if you go for positive impact and you make business for good, like you could say, then actually it improves your business case. It's not something which has a cost price and has a negative influence or anything. It's the other way around.
Yeah.
And I really want to stipulate that if you look at it and you put your ambition a bit further down the line and you look, how can I contribute to the social, ecological or financial assets by innovative business cases,
Yes.
your business case will be better.
Yes.
So that's another perspective. That's also the reason why I think the accounting is so important. If we account for total value and we account for the value improvement and also demolishment of those same assets, then the world will change even faster. And because I find that so important, that's the reason I talk about shared value more than I do about greening or CSR, of all those other terms.
And we are apparently in the London Year of Finance.
We are. It was just launched.
And now tell us about the London Year of Finance and tell us about financial innovation in relation to the new economy.
Well, for one thing, the whole transition of the economy, we were talking about the low carbon economy, but we're dealing actually with all the sustainable development goals, like we just set them with the UN.
Yep.
And if you look at the transition needed, it's a massive investment that it needs to be accordingly. So it's $1 trillion business to get there. And we have to finance that.
Yeah.
But then it's really important that the financial world, so the investors, the pension funds, the stock exchanges, all the parties involved there, really have ambition in bringing the money to the future and not keeping it in our, from tomorrow's perspective, our past.
Yeah.
Now you see a big development going on, and the COP21 really helped in that perspective, because we see investors divesting actually from fossil companies and assets.
Yes.
So you see the changes going on rapidly, and those assets will diminish in value very quickly.
Yes.
And the new businesses, which are business for good for the world, they will increase.
Yes, yes. And indeed, I suppose there is a very careful balance that needs to be struck between, if you like, the green and the black and the oil and the fossil fuel sector. So we know that fossil fuels are going to be with us for the foreseeable future. But we also know incredible technological innovation. And then also you flagged the idea of stranded assets.
Yes.
The idea that there are more proven reserves in the ground than we can ever burn if we want to keep the temperature of the planet below the 2 degrees increase that scientists warn us against. And it's fascinating how that argument about stranded assets was never heard of 4 years ago. And yet last year the Bank of...
Well, it's the Bank of England,
We're talking about
who did a good pledge and was followed up in many countries after that. But actually now all the big pension funds and investors are mitigating risks.
Yeah, sure.
And fossils are a huge risk.
Yeah, sure.
Because it's been estimated, and those estimations change, of course, day by day, but between 2/3 and 4/5 of the fossils in the ground will not be used anymore.
Yeah.
And those have to be booked off.
Yeah.
And Marconi, he pointed out that it's actually a huge risk to the financial system, because if all those stranded assets appear at the same time, we have another crisis.
Yes.
But not only the fossil corner is in the stranded assets, but also like production fabrics that are really old-fashioned. We won't want them anymore in the near future. So we'll have lots of goals of stranded assets actually, not only the ones we see now.
Yes, indeed.
It's a great opportunity for new businesses and for disruptive innovators to come into the place. It's not that we really want businesses to disappear. They will if they don't innovate fast enough and they don't do sustainable changes fast enough.
Yeah.
On the other hand, we also have large companies like DSM, which was actually a coal mine in the past, that reinvented themselves over time.
Yes.
And those large companies who take a track of time, they often have by now like investors, companies, venture companies like Unilever has Unilever Ventures, and a lot of them have them. And that's actually a smart model, because what they do, they use their scale, because there are companies that are larger than complete economies of countries, have huge impact. They connect to small startups and scale-ups who have innovation that they can use in their companies and to their clients.
Yes.
They invest in them, they scale up the innovation, and they innovate themselves. And that's actually, you could say, small meets big kind of invention, which truly helps.
Now, you talk in your book, and this is very close to me, about accountants saving the world, and the chief financial officer becoming a chief valuation officer.
And that's close to you?
I am a chartered accountant.
I knew
I'm
that.
sure that CFOs and accountants may not see the world like this. But you're also vice chairman of a large international accountants firm. So enlighten us. Tell us about CFO to CVO.
Well, if you're in a company, like say before, you had your CEO and he was like the boss steering the gas.
And often a he.
And often a he.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, I don't know how that is with CFOs though. And then you had the CFO who was on the break all the time.
Yep.
Whereas if you are busy with creating value on all assets and you economize that value, then the chief value officer is the navigator of all those value. So for instance, if you were the CVO for Puma in 2010, and you made the integrated report, you calculated that you would have to take 45 million off your profit because of the externalities caused. And then you're in charge of seeing what changes can be made to bring that down or reversed to create value, for instance, in the social part. So you have much more influence if you perceive your role in that way, if you're the navigator of value, than in the old way where we're just the one putting the foot on the brake.
Marga, let's talk about you and education. You invest quite a lot of time in education in several countries and with different organisations, like Global University Systems, for example. And also you have board positions in science institutions, which we talked about in the introduction. We are going to be developing an MBA within GUS based on your book and your thinking, which is very exciting. What is your drive towards this non-business field, if you like?
Well, it's actually the future of business education.
Okay.
I look at it that way. Because all our future leaders, and we need them, we really need them, leaders that can lead the way into a sustainable business and innovations in that field. But now, currently, if you look at most MBAs and business schools, we educate like 90% old economy. And then we give them a bit of CSR or a bit of sustainability. But ethics. It's not the core. And because it's a complete paradigm shift, it's no good. Because you cannot go on doing the same and changing a bit. You have to change the whole way of thinking about business. That's why I wrote the book with 7 chapters, 7 windows of opportunity being actually all the 7 management fields.
Yes.
So if we are able to change education into new economy education with business for the future, then we would change business itself. And in fact, if you look at education, it should be ahead of times. Because if now you start like a management program or a business school, you're busy between 2 and 6 years. And then you come into the business arena. So actually, we should be like 5 to 7 years ahead, but we're behind.
Yes.
So I really want to contribute in that change and make an effort to make education much more about the future. And also, I think it's fun. I mean, it's really exciting to be with young people who have the courage and the inspiration to bring a different thing into the world.
Yes.
And also young people, I mean, there are scientists who talk about the X, Y, Z generations, but a lot of the characteristics we need in people in terms of morality, but also in terms of value, personal values, young people are at a different stage than you and me are, for instance. Take an example, we still have the feeling that to own things, it's important.
Yes.
Much younger people, they want access to functions. They want to have the freedom to choose what they want at the time they want. So for instance, the whole sharing economy and the sharing of cars and other things, they have much less difficulty with it than we have.
Yes.
So they're actually ahead of us in many things.
So finally, I quite like to ask you 2 or 3 personal questions, if I may.
Okay,
And
go
please
ahead.
feel free to say no, thank you. What do you still wish to do in 2016 and beyond?
Well, in 2016, for me, it's important to really scale up innovative, sustainable business throughout Europe and the world.
Yeah.
And I'm actually preparing a big initiative for that at this time. Because I was telling you about the venture parts of the large corporation, about all those startups, but there's somewhere in between.
Yeah.
And we have thousands of startups, but we lack actual scale-ups. So the startups that grow bigger.
Yeah.
So I want to have some meaning in that arena in 2016 and beyond, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a new mission of mine.
Good.
And beyond, well, if I may dream on a little bit, because they were personal questions, I would like to see the day that business for good is the norm, not the exception anymore.
Yeah.
I want to really reach that point.
Yeah. This is a good challenge
It
because
is.
we have a lot to recover in terms of
We
trust
do.
in business.
We do.
And it's great to hear you say that. That's wonderful.
Thank
Wonderful.
you.
Again, in terms of personal questions, do you have a guru or a mentor? And if so, what would be the most important lesson that you've learned?
Let's say that all the business leaders that have the courage to do things that are in fact ahead of time, which means to do it today, to get the future into the past, you have to struggle. You have to really believe in yourself. You have to really have your own inner compass.
Yes.
And then I can mention you people like Brian Slat, that's actually a Dutch guy, the youngest champion of the Earth Prize winner ever, who said, for instance, you cannot get away with doing less bad and still leave all the oceans polluted with so much plastics.
Yes.
And plastics will be there for 500-600 years.
Yes.
So the damage will go on.
Yes.
And he said, I aim for nothing less than to clear up the mess.
Yes.
Well, that's maybe not a guru, but that's an example. You mentioned Paul Polman.
Yes.
He has a large listed company throughout the world. He has the guts to say, I want to be CO2 positive, so he really turns it around, by 2030.
Yes.
Leaders like that know that they have a big risk at their hands, because the ambition they are mentioning is actually almost undoable. So all the people in this field that mention goals that are truly almost impossible, they are actually my inspiration.
In your movie about the book, you say that I am business, and that those who contributed to the destruction of the world can reinvent contribution to the restoration of the world. Do you really think people can change?
Yeah, I do. I do. And it's important that we all do, actually.
Yeah.
Because if we don't give people the chance to change, if we don't recognize that we all contributed in one way or another to the destruction of the earth, like I said in the movie, then who would be left to do the restoration with?
Yeah.
And since we need everybody in this restoration challenge, let's give everybody the chance to change. And not say, you're bad, you're out. But say, your past is not what your future should be, so join us.
Good.
I think that's a much better strategy.
And that's a wonderful note to end on.
Thank
Marga
you very
Hoek,
much.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.